get updates, and people could come back if they wanted, and had additional meetings with Korzybski. He didn't see what he was doing as therapy. He presented himself as an educator, and still, you have to acknowledge that there's this area between psychotherapy and education. There's kind of a no man's zone, so to speak, and Korzybski was basically working in that interstice between those two. So his work was basically educational, and then if people needed psychotherapy of some kind, he would refer people to psychiatrists. But he wasn't claiming to do psychotherapy. But it ended up having therapeutic effects for many of the people he worked with. So at the end of his life, in the sense that he had put together this system and developed some workable methods, they're very simple, some of them, and had worked with enough people, taught enough people, and worked with enough individuals to see that really, if you can get people to look at their own thinking and maybe change their thinking so it's more realistic, and that's easier said than done, but if you have a method for doing that, and he had developed something that I think he felt at the end of his life that he had done something, and he felt fulfilled in that way. In some of the other ways, in terms of what his ambitions were, I think he may have been disappointed, but it may have been that he gave up his early, perhaps over-idealization of the possibility of having a major change in the way the world operates in terms of how people make decisions and how governments work and so forth and so on. I think that at the end of his life he realized that it wasn't going to happen in his lifetime, and it's 2011 now, and I'm fairly clear. I wouldn't say I'm absolutely certain, but it seems clear and clear that humanity is going to have to go through some pretty bad crises in the future before enough people wake up to realize that they need to start thinking differently. So, in that sense, I think Korzybski probably was disappointed, but he was nothing if not a realist. And I think he was pretty fulfilled when he went rather quickly in 1950.
You're talking about, we have to enter a new era of consciousness. Is this kind of new agey? You're saying we're entering the age of Aquarius?
Well, I'm not really much into the New Age stuff, although it may remind some people of that. But obviously, from my point of view anyhow, we seem to be in some kind of bottleneck as a world, in the human world. The environment seems to be getting threatened. The climate seems to be changing. People are battling about what the causes of that are. There's all this political upheaval, which many people attribute to the increased communication of people organizing in Egypt using Facebook and their cell phones, which was not possible for the masses before. Now, I don't know whether, like Libya now, there's a situation now where it looks like a new government of the people who are rebelling against Gaddafi are going to possibly take over if they haven't already, and looking for Gaddafi. And, that may be, I'm not someone who's tremendously in love with Muammar Gaddafi, because I knew somebody who was on that plane and that went down in Lockerbie. So, good riddance to him. But who's going to be taking his place? That's the question. So there's enough of a thing going on in the world that's due to some of the trends that I was talking about before, this accelerating communication. But it may not, unless people learn to look at their own lives and their own belief systems, which Robert Anton Wilson abbreviated as BS, unless people can do that, then we're just going to end up with more Gaddafis there and elsewhere. So to me, it seems obvious that humanity is in need of a new paradigm, and if somebody wants to think that that's New Age, there's nothing I can do about that. But I try to qualify my statements. I don't know what's going to happen, and maybe some people think that what I've said so far, that I'm just full of it. So,
tell me about your book on how to lead a more sane life.
Yeah. Well, I think that in a way, Korzybski, a biography, I've talked a lot about just general topics and that are perhaps more theoretical. But I did, before I go on, I want to say that part of the reason, my intent in writing the biography was to present some of this material about how to drive yourself sane in the course of the story about a life of a very interesting human being. So there are sword fights in that book. There are battlefield scenes where Korzybski and his friends are riding horseback trying to dodge German and Russian artillery shells being bombarded at them. There's a lot of interesting stories, and I tried to bring out as much as I could the interesting narrative element, the interesting story, which I consider Korzybski's life. And the story of his relationship with his wife is a kind of a very interesting love story. And his work with his students, which involves some very dramatic episodes. So in the course of doing that, of telling that story, I've also interweaved, because it was the main part of what his mission in life was to develop his work and the various things that he wrote over the years. He wrote many articles and papers that were presented and published in various places. And so I try to show in the course of the development of his life and what was motivating him, what was happening at that time in history, how his work developed out of that. So it's a very interesting, I think reading the story, the biography might be a good way for some people to get into some of the things about how to actually drive yourself sane. That was part of the intent of writing the book that way. But in terms of just presenting Korzybski's system, my wife and I, Susan Presby Kodish, and myself, Bruce Kodish, wrote an introduction. In 1993, it was published by the Institute of General Semantics, the first edition. The title of the book was Drive Yourself Sane, Using the Uncommon Sense of General Semantics. Then the book went out of print. It sold fairly well for a small little book, and we decided in the Institute was going to publish a second edition, and for various reasons that didn't happen, and we decided we had some revisions to do, and we wanted to get the book out to the public again because we thought it was important. So we started a publishing company in 2001 called Extensional Publishing, and we published it ourselves, which has been an adventure. And
is that a glamorous life, being a publisher?
Oh, not exactly. But some people may think it's glamorous. I guess it's glamorous if you're an entrepreneurial type and you have something that you desperately feel a tremendous urgency that you want to get out to people. Then, maybe it is glamorous. But anyhow, that sold very well over many years, and it went out of print. And then we decided, instead of since we needed to switch printers, we decided to revise the second edition, which we did, and that just came out at the beginning of 2011, the third edition, and the book is entitled Drive Yourself Sane, Using the Uncommon Sense of General Semantics, with a foreword by Albert Ellis.
Wow.
And, basically what we did in that book, and there have been, as I said, over the years, and even during Korzybski's lifetime, there have been, starting with Stuart Chase's book,